Our next topic is the future of work.
Riaz Shah. In this session, Riaz Shah will explore the future of work, considering how changes in demographics, technology, and new employee attitudes are reshaping jobs and workplaces. These changes and the pandemic allow us the opportunity to redefine how we think about work through bold new initiatives, such as portfolio careers and the 4-day week. How can we envision a more sustainable future for work, ensuring it's both enjoyable and productive for everyone?
Our next speaker has been invited and is presented by Bank of Cyprus. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Riaz Shah.
Hello. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here in Cyprus, one of my favorite countries to visit. And this is me. I'm Riaz Shah. I've just finished 40 years at Ernst & Young 2 weeks ago. And I was in tech consulting there, and I was also the global learning leader. And now I'm a professor at Hult International Business School, and I also spend my time running a school for disadvantaged kids in London called the 1 Degree Academy. So if any of you are ever in London, we would love for you to visit, because we love to have lots of different people visiting our school. One of the things I did at EY was start this place. It's called the EY Tech University in Palo Alto in California, right next to Stanford. And there we take business people and our own senior partners, and we take them on a 4-day journey to explore what technology is doing and how it's changing the world. And we had our colleagues from Bank of Cyprus come, and there's a lot of things that Bank of Cyprus are doing that really are around transforming digitally. But today I'm going to be talking to you about future of work. And whenever I think about the future of work, I think about it in 3 ways. Firstly, people. What's happening around the world in terms of people, particularly around demographics. Secondly, place. Is work a place or is it an activity? And finally, pivot. The pandemic and technology finally gives us a chance to rethink what work really is and really take some bold actions around work, which is what I'm hoping we do around the world. So let's talk about people first. And this number here, 2.1, is key to demographics. And what it represents is what we call the replacement rate. It's the number of kids you need to have in a developed country to keep the population the same. Every couple needs to have 2.1 kids. 0.1 because not all kids make it to adulthood. So how are we doing on this number? What's been happening? Well, around the world, if you look at the global stats from the UN, since 1970, fertility has massively been dropping. So 50 years ago, every woman was having almost 5 children. And today, it's now less than half that. So is this a good thing? How many of you think this is a good thing? Put up your hand if you think this is a good thing that fertility rates are dropping. And how many of you think this is not a good thing? Okay, that's interesting. It's about half and half. So if you're in Italy, here's the situation in Italy. The birth rate in Italy is 1.2. And there's roughly 60 million people there, half men, half women. So how many kids will they have in the next generation? Well, it's only the women that can have kids. So you multiply 30 million by 1.2, and you get 36 million. And if you do that again, you get down to only 22 million. Within 2 generations, everything else being equal, the population of Italy goes down to about 1/3 of what it is today. And if you look at last year, they had 12 deaths for every 7 births. And the population went down by about 180,000 people. That means about 180 fewer schools that they will need in 5 years' time. That means a city like Florence no longer existing. And this is net of immigration, by the way. If you think there's hordes of immigrants coming in, this is net of immigration. They still reduced their population by 180,000. And so no wonder the Prime Minister and the politicians are saying this is really about the future of Italy, whether or not Italy can continue to exist. If you look across the world, we're at about 8.1 billion people at the moment, fertility rate 2.3. And you think, if you take all the big countries in the world, which countries are above even a birth rate of 2? Forget 2.1, even 2. Which countries? So have a think yourselves and think about, well, what are these countries where we're having more than 2 kids? This is it. There aren't any others. They're the only large countries in the world with having more than 2 kids in that country. And as you can see, most of them in sub-Saharan Africa, then you've got Pakistan, Philippines, and then a set of countries at the bottom that I think are below their replacement rate, like India, 2.0, Myanmar, Indonesia, South Africa, 2.3. That means every other large country in the world is on the right-hand side. All those countries. And, you know, last night somebody said to me, is it the Catholic countries are on the left-hand side? No. The Catholic countries are largely on the right-hand side. They have fewer than 1.2 kids per couple. Is it the Muslim countries? No. Look at Bangladesh, 1.9. Bangladesh used to be 6.7 kids per woman and dropped down to 1.9 because of the actions by the government. Same as Iran. And then you look at South Korea, 0.8. Those 50 million people in South Korea will be less than 25 within 1 generation if everything else remains equal. That means people not living longer. That means no immigration. The country will halve. And Cyprus is at 1.3. So Cyprus is amongst the lowest in the world. And basically, you guys need to have a lot more kids. That's the real outcome of this. If you don't, and you don't import a lot of people, then you're going to find your economy is going to be shrinking. And that's what's happening. In Japan, we're losing 500,000 people a year. In Korea, we're losing 1 million people every 2 years. In Japan, we've been closing 500 schools every year for the last 15 years. There are some schools with only 1 pupil in them. China has now reached peak population last year. It's now declining. India is the most populous country in the world. And even the US is now flatlining in terms of population. What about Africa? Well, the Africans will be 1 in 4 people by 2050. 1/4 of the world's population will be in Africa. And part of the reason for that is the birth rates are high, healthcare is improving, and you can see the number of kids that are surviving their first 5 years is massively improving. Egypt lost almost 1/4 of its kids in 1970. Now it's only 2% of kids. So as a result, and people are still having lots of kids. So as a result of this, Africa is one place where there will be much more business for you to do than today, compared to Europe, where there'll be fewer people. So when you look across the world like this, this is the Peters projection. It's a much more accurate display of how big countries are in comparison to each other. Africa really is that big. You could fit the whole of the US, the whole of Europe, the whole of China, the whole of India, and still have space left over. And when you look at this map, you say, where do most of the people in the world live? The reality is this, that over half the people in the world live inside that circle compared to the people outside it. So 4.2 billion live inside the circle, 3.8 billion live outside the circle, 4.2 versus 3.8. More people live inside that circle than outside it. And I talk to a lot of my clients who are Europe headquartered or US headquartered, and they think they're global companies. And I say to them, how many of your people are from within that circle who are senior in your company? I looked at your board. This morning I was just talking to Ericsson. I look at their board. It's full of Swedish people, maybe a few other Europeans. And yet this is where the growth is in the world. So this is something to think about in terms of both business opportunity for you and diversity in your company is thinking about this is where the growth is. What we're also seeing is the average age in countries is getting older. Bit obvious, if you have fewer kids, the average age goes up. And so China used to have 6 kids and the average age was about 20. As it's declined, the average age is now much higher. So if you look across the world and say, well, what is the median age in big countries? That's what you get. You are young if you're 48 in Japan. You're old if you're 19 in Nigeria. And where's Cyprus? 39. That's pretty old compared to the global average of 30. The average age in Cyprus is 39. How many of you in this room are younger than 39? Okay, about half of you. There you go. That's the average age. So that's pretty old, isn't it? 39? I didn't think of a 38-year-old as being particularly young, but I guess when you're in Cyprus, you do. Here's the problem. If you're in Germany and you're Lufthansa and you're trying to sell to Nigerians, you have double trouble. Not only don't you understand the culture, but you're also talking to an entirely different generation. You're talking to somebody who could be your kid, could even be your grandkid possibly if you're Japanese. So this is a big issue that if you want to sell to those countries below the global average, you probably need some of those people to be working with you to understand those countries. Japan, it really is a country full of old people. A nation full of old people where more diapers are sold to old people than they are to babies. So if I look at Cyprus, these are the population pyramids in Cyprus, and this comes from a website called populationpyramids.com. There you go. And what it shows is 1990, you had almost a perfect pyramid. Lots of young people, fewer old people. Where we are at 2010, it looks a little bit less like a pyramid, more like an arrowhead. And by 2023, it's kind of weird. There's actually more blue than there is pink. There's more men in Cyprus, it looks like, than there are women in certain categories. And by 2050, it looks not right. It doesn't look like a pyramid anymore. Cyprus Mail says that by 2050, over half the population will be over 65. So by 2050, your average age will move to 65 from 39, if things continue the way they are. And you look at 2050 and you think, if there were a group of Cypriots like there are in this room, and I were to throw a random ball at somebody and it hits somebody randomly, the likelihood is it will hit somebody who's aged 60 to 64. Because that's the most common age bracket in the country by 2050. The most common age bracket in Cyprus, 2050, is 60 to 64. So who cares? Why is this a problem? Well, the problem is the red lines. The red line shows you where the people of working age are, between 20 and 65. And you can see as you look across those years, is the percentage of people who are working is reducing compared to the people who aren't. This is called the potential support ratio by the UN. And what it means is there are almost twice as many people you're supporting by 2050 as there are in 1990. What that means is your taxes will go up. The people who are working are going to have to pay a lot more taxes to keep people who are not working, unless you have a lot more immigration, or you decide to have many more kids, or you increase the retirement age. If you increase the retirement age to 80, then you're fine. Okay? So this is not a Cypriot problem. This is a problem in many parts of the world. In the US, the latest stats show that there are only 0.7 people available for every job vacancy. So if you're trying to recruit, forget about cybersecurity experts and data analysts, you're just trying to recruit a fast food chef. You can't find them. They're either in the wrong part of the country or they don't have the skills. And anyway, there's only 0.7 people unemployed per vacancy. And the same is happening in Germany, the same is happening in the UK. We shot ourselves in the foot, as the previous speaker said, on Brexit. We've got 500,000 fewer people in the UK of working age than we had prior to the pandemic. Cyprus economy is doomed without migrant workers. The OEB general manager says businesses are suffering from a severe labor shortage. And even in China, we're short of 30 million manufacturing workers. So this is a common thing across all those countries that are on the right-hand side of my chart. So what is it that governments can do? Well, they could encourage fertility, but most of those ideas haven't worked. China is now lower than it's ever been. You could boost immigration, but that comes with all sorts of political issues. Even here in Cyprus, you have demonstrations against foreigners coming in to do work at the same time as businesses demanding more workers. You could make people work longer, but who wants to work till they're 80? Not many people. You could have more working mothers, but the more working mothers you have, the lower the fertility rate. You could educate and train the people, cross-train the people who lose their jobs as truck drivers or whatever, and retrain them to be cybersecurity analysts. But that's quite a heavy undertaking. And you could improve technology, productivity through technology. So if you can bring in AI and other technologies that mean you don't need as many people, maybe that's the route out of this issue. The other thing we're finding is that employees are now demanding much more flexibility than they ever had before. And so this EY survey says 54% of employees are saying, I'm going to quit if you don't give me the flexibility I need. And so you say, all right, what flexibility do you need? And they say, I just want flexibility in where I work, what work I do, when I work, who I work with, why I work, and how I work. Give me all that and I'll stay. That's a lot. Think about your own teams. How many of these types of flexibility things are you offering your employees? Because the more of these you offer, the more likely, more engaged your people will be, the more likely they're going to stay with you, more likely they're going to come to you for work. The other thing is that purpose and societal goals are much more important than ever. And suddenly businesses across the world are being asked, what's your viewpoint on racism or LGBTQ+? And you say, well, I'm an airline. What the hell have I got to do with LGBTQ+ issues? But increasingly, employees are saying, if I'm going to work with you, 10 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, I want to make sure that your values are aligned to mine. And increasingly, customers are also saying, I expect you to take a stand on these issues. Nike, where do you stand on Black Lives Matter? Adidas, where do you stand on Black Lives Matter? Because I'm going to make purchasing decisions based on that. So I talked about Lufthansa, and this is what they did. They painted one of their planes, Love Hansa. In pride colors, this is last year, and this is on LinkedIn. What do you think happened? There were 14,000 comments. Roughly half of them were positive, and the other half were negative. Even if you don't speak German, you can probably work out what some of those say, right? And so I said to Lufthansa executives, were you right to do this? Were you right to do something which split your customer base like this and your employee base? And they said, yes, and we would still do it. Because we think this is the right thing to do, and we think more people are with us than against us. And because it's the right thing to do, we don't care if we lose customers as a result of this. And I think that's really interesting. I think more and more, all businesses are going to have to make those kinds of decisions. So that's some stuff around people. Let's talk about place then. COVID, did it really wreck the office? Was it like this, coming in and smashing all of our offices? And it makes you think, well, is work an activity or is it a place? And I remember early on in the pandemic, the CEOs used to come in and nobody else would into the office. Your CEO has no lunch buddy because everyone's working at home. But now we've got JP Morgan saying, you better come to the office or you'll be fired. And even Zoom is now telling its people they have to come to the office 3 days a week. Even Zoom, right? And last month I was talking to Drew Smith from Zoom, who runs the UK, and he said, as we brought teams back together, we were surprised how many issues were solved just by virtue of being in the same room. People were much more productive working in person. So this thing is happening right now between people wanting remote work and businesses wanting them to come into the office. And there's all sorts of issues both ways as to which it goes. And how many of you are insisting all your people work 5 days a week in the office? Wow. And 4? And 3? 2? 1? 0? Wow, that's almost like same all the way across. Really interesting. But increasingly in London, certainly we're seeing people moving to 3 days a week. So people can't find enough people, and will AI replace entire jobs? And I think the answer is not quite. What we need to do is to think of not a job, but think of a job as a set of tasks. And we can unbundle the job into different tasks that need to be done by you. They could be done by you remotely or by somebody else remotely, or they could be automated. And so I often say to people, if you're insisting on working remotely 100%, then I don't really need you, because if I can find somebody with the same skills in the Philippines or India, they could do your remote work 100% just as well for half the price. So you have to be a bit wary about asking for 100% remote work. But what all this means is that you can now engage talent from across the world. So you don't have to have people physically with you, and you don't have to only recruit the same kind of people you've always recruited. You could automate, you could offshore, you could have older workers, parent returners, part-timers, disabled workers, carers, gig workers. A lot more opportunities for you to bring in talent to work with you. Finally, pivot. I think all this change brings about an opportunity for us. We are on the cusp of many moments, a bit like the Gutenberg moment, where all of these technologies could radically change our world, whether it's AI or whether it's quantum computing or energy transition or robotic process automation. Any of these things can radically change our world. The difference is they're all happening at the same time. We've got many Gutenberg moments all happening at the same time. And they are going to impact the kind of jobs that people do, certainly the tasks that a lot of these people do. These are the most common jobs in the US. This represents over 25% of the workforce. The number one job is nurse and personal aid. Fast food worker is 3.4 million people just doing fast food in the US. But you could see a lot of these jobs are going to be impacted by the technologies that we've just talked about. And so I think there's a real danger here that if we have a lot of people, this happening very quickly, and a lot of people unemployed, we could be in danger of all sorts of issues. The highest unemployment rate in Germany before it became Nazi was 29%. So there is a real danger, I think, of societal unrest if this stuff happens very, very quickly and we don't have enough time to react to it. And then there's generative AI. So this thing, all about creating new stuff rather than just building on the old stuff, is radically going to change things for us. And there's also things like Microsoft Copilot, which everybody who's got Office is going to get. And instead of me typing out a reply to my friends, suddenly it will know all my previous emails, it will know all the data that's on my system, it will know all the data that's on the internet, and it can reply to a question, it can schedule a meeting for me, it can write a timeline for a product launch, it can do so many things. And the question is, what's going to be the impact on your business? Does this mean that this stuff does a lot of the boring work and your people can go on and do much more creative work? Does it mean you don't need as many people and the worker shortage won't have as big as an impact? Because generative AI certainly will impact all these kind of jobs, for sure. Already 70% of coding is done with AI. Journalists, accountants, legal assistants, all these jobs are going to be impacted. So what am I saying? Am I saying that basically all of these kind of jobs will all be automated and that we just automate everything there is, right? Well, when you look at the press, you get articles like this. 300 million jobs could be impacted, says Goldman Sachs. And then Business Insider says, don't worry, take a chill pill, you'll be fine. Both in the same month. So when you read these articles, who are you to believe? I've been thinking about this issue for about 6 or 7 years, and I think this is true, that will technology downscale or destroy some jobs? The answer is absolutely. We've just seen examples. At the same time, will technology create jobs or upscale jobs? Absolutely. There's all sorts of jobs now that didn't exist before. Web designer didn't exist 20 years ago, really. Prompt engineer didn't exist 2 years ago. Mindfulness trainer didn't exist 10 years ago. There's all sorts of jobs that we're really good at creating. The questions are, will the jobs that we create offset the jobs? You okay, sir? Yeah. Will the jobs that are lost off-scale to jobs that are created? Will we have enough time to retrain those truck drivers into coders? And what do we do in the long run when coding gets 100% automated? And the answer to these questions is nobody knows. And that's why we're getting these articles that say the opposite, because everybody is guessing as to what will be the impact of all this. But what we do know is that even if we don't face mass unemployment, we will face mass redeployment. We have to reskill our people. And governments and large employers have a big duty towards reskilling their people. As I say, I think some of the jobs that are going to be created, we don't know what they are yet. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have invented all of these jobs that exist today. And there is this thing that economists call the lump of labor fallacy, which is this idea that there are only so many jobs. And if automation or immigration takes away these jobs, there's less jobs for the rest of us. The reality is, over time, human beings have always been really good at creating new jobs. And I think a lot of people are hoping that that will continue, despite a large number of people being redeployed. The other thing is that, when you're a kid, you don't go, when I grow up, I want to work in a call center answering calls from irate Americans about their phone bill. Nobody dreams of these awful jobs that we have. Most people are not engaged at work. Gallup survey of 2023 says only 15% of people are actively engaged at work. That means the majority of people hate going to work. And that's terrible. There are so many better things we can do with human beings than have them be robotic, sitting in a call center. We can have robots doing that and have our people doing much more interesting, much more creative things, and spending their 82,000 hours at work in a much more productive and happier way. I really think that this is the time for bolder ideas. This new era demands us to be bold, and governments need to do things. Governments like Singapore are already doing things. The Singapore Skills Future gives every citizen $500 to spend on reskilling. We need big ideas because 100 years ago, we had 14, 15-year-old kids working in factories, and we created schools, and by doing that, we created teenagers. That was 100 years ago. And 80 years ago, people used to work 6 or 7 days a week. And we created the weekend. These are things that didn't exist before. And so we need bold new answers like this. We need to create teenagers the weekend or something like that going forward. One of these ideas is that if technology can take away so much of this work from us and make us much more productive, then instead of that benefit only going to the employers, only going to the shareholders, maybe some of that benefit should go to the workers. Maybe we should be working a 4-day week. And in the UK, we did a study of 61 companies with 3,300 employees last year. And it was the 180-100 model. So you get paid 100% of your salary, you work 4 days a week, and we expect you to produce 100% of the output. And you think, how is that possible? Well, the reality is when you do this, there's been several studies, including this one, that shows that huge benefits. 92% of those companies are continuing the pilot, making it permanent. 57% reduction in staff leaving, and 37% of people saw health improvements. Over half the people said they were sleeping more than an hour a day more than they were before. They were much healthier. So I think this is exactly the kind of thing that we need to look at. The second thing is we've lived our lives according to these 3 chunks. We think of our lives as a period of learning until we're, say, 21, a period of working till we're 65, and then we go off into our caravan, play some golf, and die. And maybe that's not the right way to live our lives, particularly if technology means we're going to be able to live to 100 or 120 very soon, as we cure Alzheimer's, heart disease, and cancer. Maybe we need to rethink our lives, not in these three chunks, but like this, turn it on its side and think that, yeah, there'll be a period of full-time learning up front, but why couldn't I take off time and do a year's worth of learning as I get older? Why can't I work? Why do I have to retire at 60 or 65? Why can't I continue to work throughout my life? So I'm 61, and I feel more capable than I have at any time in my life. It seems crazy to give up working now, but at the same time, I do want to continue learning, and at the same time, I do want to continue playing. And why wouldn't I do all three things at once? So I think employers that can figure this out and offer their employees this kind of portfolio life are going to be the ones that succeed in this war for talent. And we ought to be giving people this, because this creates much happier people. So that's what I've talked about. I've talked about people and place and pivot, and often people say to me, okay, but if I'm a leader, how should I respond to all this disruption that's taking place, all this AI stuff? What do I need to do? And I say, well, there's three things, really. This is what I would tell your kids. This is what I would tell you. This is what I try and do myself. Number one, be more curious. How can you ask more questions, reduce the number of statements you make, be more critical about what you see, particularly from ChatGPT? How do you keep updated with what's happening in the world? So be more curious. However curious you are now, be more curious. Secondly, be more bold. Do more experiments. We don't know how things are going to end, but if we try lots of little experiments and some succeed, that's a fantastic way for us to be ready for this future. Try more creativity, try more resilience, and encourage healthy conflict. I come from the UK, and we love compromise in the UK. The problem with compromise is the enemy of innovation. So if my friend and we disagree on the topic in London, we'll get into a room, we'll argue it out, and we'll agree a compromise that both of us are equally unhappy with. That's not the answer. Maybe I ought to shut up and try what my friend is saying instead. Maybe this is the time to try bold new ideas and encourage conflict. And finally, I think we need to be more human. In the time of AI, we need to increase our human skills. What's our individual purpose? Why do we exist on this earth? How can we increase our emotional intelligence, our adaptability? How can we be more diverse? And how can we do more collaboration and be more caring and more kind? Because AI is going to really struggle with those things. So I always say, be more curious, be more bold, and be more human is the answer to the future. You know, the word crisis in Chinese has these two characters. The first one, wei, means danger, and the second one, zhi, means opportunity. And you can choose to see all of this change that we're talking about as being full of danger. Oh my God, all these jobs are going to disappear. Will my companies still exist? What will happen to my country with all of this demographic change? How will AI affect me and my kids personally? You can choose to see all of this being full of danger. But at the same time, you can choose to see this as full of opportunity. Opportunity for us to get rid of this boring work, to take out the robots from the humans, for us to do much more creative work, for us to be more happy, an opportunity for your company, opportunity for you, an opportunity for your family. I really hope that all of you choose to see all of this as being full of opportunity. Thank you very much.